I wanted to start this video off to say that I have the questions pulled up on my screen, and that's just what I'm reading off of. But I wanted to start with number 2 for the 1920s. Explain why the 1920s was a time of heated culture wars. It was a time of heated culture wars because you had one side that was fighting to keep old American traditional ways. They wanted to not change, and they wanted to stay in their normal environment that they're used to. And then the other side was modernists who wanted change, and they wanted people to embrace what they believe in and their culture. How are these conflicts related to World War I? One piece of the readings from lesson 6 from Perusal I wanted to say that related to World War I was the war simultaneously stoked national pride and fueled disenchantments that burst progressive era hopes for the modern world. And it laid the groundwork for a global depression, a second world war, and an entire history of national, religious, and cultural conflict around the globe. So the World War I is what caused people to start thinking and wondering and stating their beliefs of what they want America to look like. People obviously and rightfully so felt that they had the right to want the world to look a certain way since they live here. People only have the right to want to live where they are at. People want to enjoy where they're at. Because of this war, people were talking, and they either were scared of the new ideas that were coming after the war and they wanted to stick to their normal old ways, or people were embracing the new change, and women were working, and soldiers were coming back from the war. And for example, it's almost like in one of our readings where Black people were going to war, and whenever they were coming back, they were still being segregated after fighting for their country. And so the modernists were fighting for equalness in that, rightfully so, which I agree with, because in my opinion, I think it was crazy for someone to go and fight for our world and support us and keep us safe, and then whenever they come back, they aren't greeted with gratefulness. That honestly hurt me. Reading that, it made me feel very upset. Explain some of the ways in which anti-modernists tried to hold on to traditional American values. One of the ways that comes to mind is that because the world was split up into the modernist and then anti-modernist, with people feeling so strongly about it and you having extremists in both areas, the extremists of the anti-modernists that were wanting to keep the old traditional American ways, they were giving the KKK more power. Since they were believing so much in that, there was more people joining the Klan, and since the Klan already had so much power, it was just fueling their power. On to my second question, I chose number 3 for the Great Depression. What were the causes of the Great Depression? Something that I wanted to start this question off with was a few sentences from lesson 8 on Perusal. And that reads, stock prices were continually rising because people had faith in the stock market and kept investing, which causes stock prices to rise. This all was fine for a while, but stock prices can't go up forever. At some point, the bubble has to burst, and that's what happened in October 1929, which was the stock market crash, which is what ultimately caused the Great Depression. And so the way that I think of it is kind of like a domino effect, is that in this time, they were presenting all these new shiny things that people wanted to buy, and so people were continuously buying. In my opinion, I feel like that is what caused really bad money spending habits. But they were introducing all these things, and people were buying them, and then whenever people were running out of that money, they were borrowing money. And so when they were borrowing that money, they were spending that on top of investing it into the stock market. And so, like that quote explained, at some point that bubble has to burst because it can't go on forever, which the stock market crash in 1929 of October is what that was, and it all crashed, and overnight people basically lost everything at that point. Also overproduction, where all the new shiny things, like I said, that were being bought those companies were overproducing because they were expecting so many people to buy it. So when that stock market crash happened, that all the production of those businesses, they were left unbought. And then that's the whole domino effect of them not being able to afford producing more because nobody's buying it. And then the people that were buying it, they lost out on their money. And on top of that, at the time, banks were failing because they didn't have insurance like they do now. I actually worked in a bank within this year, and with banks being so boring, we have a lot of time to like read over our policies and stuff like that. And one thing that I specifically remember is reading an article that we had on the bank website talking about what would happen if like the bank were to lose all their money. And since we have insurance in place now, we would be fine and people would still have their money. But back then they didn't have that. So with everything crashing and people all losing their money, including like individual people and individual businesses, people had nothing to fall back on. Except if you were really wealthy, which is another factor of that time, is that there was uneven wealth. And so the wealthy were doing just fine at the time and they had stuff to fall back on. But the people that weren't as lucky and as wealthy, they didn't have anything else to fall back on. So there was just a domino effect of not being able to afford living at the time. The next question is, what did President Roosevelt do to deal with this economic crisis? Be specific. He implemented the New Deal, which was something that implemented a lot of programs to help the economy and the people. Some of the programs included food stamps, Social Security, which people still rely on so much today. Laws and programs that he put into place were there to help the people and gain people's trust back in the economy. It also meant to get people to start working again. That way, the domino effect could be positive at this point, where everybody was supporting each other and being able to buy from the businesses that were producing and being able to support everyone else. How effective was the New Deal? Explain some specific New Deal programs. The New Deal that Roosevelt put into place was pretty effective, but it didn't solve everything. It made a really big impact though, and it made life more manageable for Americans. It got people buying again, and it, like I said, created a positive domino effect. A lot of the programs that was put into place that I had written down was CCC, WPA, FDIC, and Social Security, like I stated before. It made a really big impact because it also changed how the government helps people today. If we obviously prevent another depression like that, but it prevents people that are struggling individually. It has changed the government on how we help those people. Explain how the Depression spread to much of the rest of the world and explain how it helped lead to World War II. The Depression affected the rest of the world because a lot of other countries were depending on us through like trade and loans. For example, Britain and Germany, they were borrowing money from us and we were trading and loaning with them. And whenever the economy crashed, we didn't have any more money to loan out to them. And so that created tensions and not being able to produce for them. America wasn't able to lend their money like they used to be, and then Britain and Germany couldn't pay back what they had borrowed or trade as many goods. So it was all a domino effect in that area as well, and it caused other people to struggle. Led to a global depression. Okay, my third question that I chose was number 6, atomic bombs. Explain the Manhattan Project and how this project was kept so secret. The Manhattan Project was something that the U.S. put into place to test nuclear weapons during World War II. Learning about this project was very interesting to me, but just because of learning how secretive this was and how this was literally one of the most secretive projects ever in history. But they were testing their nuclear weapons to be able to protect themselves. And it was kept so secret because a lot of the workers that were working for them at the time, they were told to keep the secrets and they were told not to tell anybody. And they were even being watched by spies so that they weren't able to tell anybody. On top of that, they even had limited knowledge, so they didn't even know that much. But on top of that, they were just protecting themselves, and the secret that they were keeping, they were just watching them very closely and being told not to tell anybody. The places that they were doing it at was very disguised and remote to keep low for people not to know. The government was very careful in keeping this project a secret. Do you think it was necessary and or justified for America to drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan? With my morals, I do not believe so, no. It's a very hard opinion for me to make, though, because it very much goes against my morals. Just because it's so heartbreaking to learn that most of the people that were killed in those bombs were women, elderly, kids, like people that they were not fighting against. And so a lot of innocent people died from those weapons that were just being tested. And it just like I said, breaks my heart to learn that poor innocent people were having to die, like take their lives being taken away just to test these nuclear bombs and for the US to basically show dominance. Something that I noticed in one of our readings in lesson 10 that really stuck out to me is the dialogue from the one commercial that we watched that was, I believe, was being shown in America in case that we were bombed. One of the lines said, "Today they lead normal lives. They bear children. Their children are normal." Talking about people that have been exposed to the radiation from bombs. And in that, I was just very offended in a way, because the way that they word it is that, like, yeah, you were affected by radiation, but they're okay. They live on to live normal lives and all that. And I just feel like the trauma that they were put through was disregarded in that statement, because they're just, in a way, they're just brushing off on how people were affected by those bombs. On top of these bombs just being morally wrong and many innocent people dying from it, from the readings, I realized that Japan was also already losing the war, and they were already pretty weak in their economy and just the ways that they were able to fight back. And so such a big nuclear bomb that was landed on them almost feels like an over-the-top, like the way that I think of it, America was really just placing their dominance and trying to show off. And they took millions of lives doing so. And on the side where I think that it is morally wrong and very upsetting to think about, if they were just trying to show their dominance in that way, it makes me very upset that they had to show their dominance by taking so many lives. On the opposing opinion of it being justified or necessary for America to drop a bomb on Japan, they were protecting themselves, is the way that I look at it from that side. They were trying to avoid land invasion of Japan. So they were just protecting themselves. And from a lot of things that I've also read from the readings and outside sources, is that historians actually say that the bombs that killed all those people, doing so, it actually saved a lot of other lives. And so in that area, it's just like, I feel like I don't have a set opinion on that. I feel like I lean more towards it being wrong, because it upsets me so much that so many innocent lives were taken. But in return, hearing that it may have saved more lives in return, I don't know which would be the right answer. Both upset me, if I were to be honest. Why has the use of atomic bombs against Japan often been considered the beginning of Cold War? It was considered the beginning of the Cold War because whenever America did set off those bombs, it was a stand of dominance. It was kind of like, in a way that I think of it, like America flexed on everybody else. And so you either have people that responded in like bowing down and listening to them, or there were other people that were also trying to assert their dominance and go above America and place their dominance against America. It didn't directly cause a Cold War, but it did set a tone. Like, everyone realized that U.S. was trying to assert their dominance, And like I said, there was the people that did want to go above America, for example, was the Soviets. Like whenever that happened, they wanted to assert their dominance, so then they started to test the nuclear bombs, and that's whenever that escalated and created more into that. But the bombs is what started the Soviets to create their own nuclear bombs as well. Bombs proved our power, and people began to want to fight against that or bow down to it. And I believe that is it. Bye.